Welcome back to our year in review series. We're flipping over to the defensive side of the ball starting today, and we'll start with the defensive line. A lot to get to in this room. Obviously, starting with Ty Robinson. I will say before we get started, Jack linebackers won't be on the. We'll talk about them with the linebacker room, of course. So don't expect a whole lot of discussion on that in this episode specifically. But there's plenty other stuff to get to here in this defensive line room. I think we should start obviously Ty Robinson, kind of the year he had, Nash Hotmacher behind him, and a lot of outgoing guys around that, and just again a lot of discussion to have in terms of what the future of this room looks like. But we'll start here. I mean, Ty Robinson, truly a dominant season from the sixth-year senior. Came back to Nebraska to have a year like this,
Mhm.
where from last year, if he declared for the draft potentially get some looks here at the end of the draft. Now, works himself up into potentially even a second round territory. Mel Kiper thinks he's a potential second rounder. I think he's around the third, fourth round as of right now, but we'll see what happens. But truly, like a grown man at times, completely dominating games. The stats were one thing, but I think if you watch Nebraska football play this year, specifically the defense play this year, you can't ignore the impact that Ty Robinson had snap after snap.
He took the next step that Matt Rule wanted him to take when Matt Rule first got to Nebraska. He had 12 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks. His tackles were up to 37 tackles. He batted 4 passes down at the line of scrimmage. He was a beast. He was one of the best
And then think like
interior.
25 plus pressures. I don't know the exact number, but I
Yeah.
think a clear
Oh
25
yeah.
pressures on the year.
Yeah, like just think back to all the games where he's chasing the quarterback and flushing him out of the pocket. I mean, and causing an incompletion. I mean, yeah, he was a monster. He was one of the best interior defensive linemen in the country, and it felt like Tim. At some during some weeks, it felt like we had to defend Ty Robinson and what he was doing out there because he was really impacting game plans. If he wasn't making a tackle, he was eating up 2 blockers, so somebody else had a one-on-one next to him. He was doing that stuff. So and it's things like that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but he was doing it consistently and routinely every single game. I mean, he was helping guys like James Williams make an impact on the edge and helping Nash Hutmacher get a one-on-one against a guard or a center. So and of course he would always from time to time split those double teams and still get after the quarterback. I mean, he had his best season of his career, and of course he was a 6-year guy, so he was a man amongst men back there. But he was playing against other 5th-year seniors and 6th-year guys, so he's going to be greatly missed, and that's going to be a position him and Nash Hutmacher, who they have been anchors for so long in the middle of Nebraska's defensive line. Now they're gone, and now what? So that's what we're going to be talking about right now. They were so Nash and Ty were part of a group of seven, I guess, notable names that will not be with the defensive line room at Nebraska next season. Let's go through them, Tim. So James Williams, we know about him. He transferred to Florida State. He's following Terrence Knighton, his old position coach. Nash gone, Ty gone. Jamari Butler transferred to LSU. Vincent Jackson, rotational guy. He transferred to UConn back home. Kai Wallen, he transferred to Oregon State to play for who's Oregon
Trent
State's
Bray.
um,
Trent Bray.
Trent Bray, former Husker assistant Trent Bray. Thank you, Tim. Brody Tagaloa also transferring out. So there's a good group of guys that transferred out. But to be honest with you, some of those guys, I wasn't really sure how much playing time they were going to get next year anyway, because the returning crop looks pretty good. You got Keona Davis coming back, Elijah Judy as kind of that 300-pounder coming back, Cam Lenhart flashed some things late in the season after kind of a down year for most of his sophomore season. Riley Van Poppel coming back. We know about Riley Van Poppel. So there are some returning pieces that are really good to have for a new D-line coach, Terry Braden, coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs. So yeah, and there's more. And behind those guys, you have the super young guys who are still kind of developing, but we saw a little bit um, in the bowl game, a little bit. Jordan Ochoa, he's from Colorado. He spent some time in Gering, Nebraska, in the panhandle of the state. Jordan Ochoa is kind of an interesting dude. He was playing with his hand on the ground as a defensive end, and he came into the program as kind of a jack linebacker, stand up jack linebacker. So that development is interesting to see. Sua Lotu is kind of that next wave of interior defensive lineman. We'll see if he sticks with the program. Mason Goldman from Gretna, he's flashed some good stuff. Dylan Parrott, I know the coaching staff really likes Dylan Parrott, former walk-on from Iowa, converted offensive lineman. Now he's playing interior D line. And then Ashton Murphy, Elkhorn South dude. So, yeah, couple that with like the young guys out of the recruiting class: Tyson Terry, Malcolm Simpson, Kade Peters, Sean Hammerbeck. We'll see what happens with Sean Hammerbeck. I think he'll start out on the offensive side, right, Tim?
Plan is to
At
start on the
tackle.
offensive side. Yeah.
Yep. And there's always potential for him to switch over to D line too. But then the transfers: Williams Nwaneri, Jalen George from ETSU, and Gabe Moore from Mississippi State. Not a ton of production there out of those three guys. Jalen George is probably the most productive out of there, but Gabe Moore, young, didn't play last year because of health concerns, and then Williams and Worry from Missouri. Everybody knows about him. You can talk about him more, Tim, but the defensive line lost some guys, but brought some in and returning some nice pieces, but still kind of makes you wonder about how this group is going to do overall in the Big Ten next year.
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's just how are they going to replace Nash and Ty? Because those
Yep.
two specifically had legitimately game-breaking impacts on the game. And I know Nash's stats, and even his general snap-to-snap impact didn't look the same as Ty's, but he was taking up blocks as well, opening up a lot
And
for
he was
John
playing
Bullock
hurt
and the
too.
linebackers to kind of get through. He was more of a space eater this year, kind of filled that role, while Ty was the game wrecker. Around them, Jamari Butler had some nice stretches. James
Mm-hmm.
Williams, of course, there's games that were won because of James Williams' impact. He was a flashy edge rusher, and that's something that Nebraska will have to figure out. But you like the shape of this room and what it's shaping up to be, even with
Yeah.
those guys gone. Especially for what they want to be, they talk about being like a single gap team that shoots
Mm-hmm.
gaps and attacks and gets upfield. Williams and Nwaneri, is a guy that hasn't hit his potential just yet. Number one defensive tackle lineman in the country in the 2024 cycle. Redshirted this year at Mizzou, didn't really put on the weight that he needed to. But now he's reunited with Jamar Mosey, his former high school head coach. Going to be coached by Terry Braden, that knows what to do with a guy that looks like him, having coached a Chris Jones in his career, George Karlaftis. He knows what to do with these type of pass rushers. And I think that's going to really help Nwaneri. And I think he's a guy that's going to factor into the rotation, if not start this year, alongside Keona Davis and Riley Van Poppel. I was impressed with the amount of weight Riley Van Poppel put on this year as in a redshirt year, and his dedication and commitment to recognizing the plan the staff had for him to let him redshirt this year so he can step into a bigger role next year. I think that's going to be super impactful for a guy like him, who I think is next in line to step up behind Nash and Ty. Like if you're looking at someone to be that Ty Robinson replacement in particular, I think it's going to be Riley Van Poppel. I think Keona Davis is going to factor into kind of helping this program move on from those two. Elijah Judy as well, a veteran presence, plays with good
Mm-hmm.
leverage. Again, not the most flashy defensive lineman by any means, but a guy that can definitely hold his own, eat up some space, and hold his own blocks. And then Cam Leonard, like you said, it was a weird sophomore year for him, especially after
Yep.
an All American freshman season, or
Mm-hmm.
freshman All American season, back in 2023. But he's a guy that, again, like we know what he's capable of. I kind of wonder what they do with his body this year. Did they do? It felt like he put on some weight. Does he cut back down to get back to kind of like a defensive end weight, a lighter weight that allows him to move a little quicker, or does he kind of stick where he's at and learn further how to play at that weight? I think either would be beneficial for him. I'm just really intrigued. I think by him and what he can be in this team, because we saw what he was capable of last year, and this year kind of felt like he was kind of lost out there at times. Not lost, it was just kind of like lost in the shuffle, as in like you just kind of forget he's out there at times.
Yeah, I mean, and he was playing this year at 260 pounds, and I think his true freshman season when he was doing everything that he was doing, I think he was around like 245 or 250. And like you said, Tim, I think the plan right now with the defensive line is to get defensive line who can get upfield quick, and that's shooting gaps, and that's being athletic, and that's getting skinny and just like getting in the backfield, and not these 330-pound dudes who can't move anymore. It's like I think they're shifting away from that. I think they have been shifting away from that. So I think more. Perhaps Lenhart kind of works on his body again. Maybe they get him at a lighter weight, or maybe he just learns to do it at 260, at 265, something like that. Because I don't think you want Cam Lenhart getting any more bigger than he is right now. I don't know if that's in the cards for him, but we'll see. Um, but yeah, it's a group that I'm sure the team has added from the portal. With the three guys that we talked about, Waneri, George, and Moore. But again, there's just not a lot of proven commodities in that trio right now. So I think that you're still gonna probably see some potential movement with the defensive line and trying to add more guys. If they, if the staff thinks that they can help, because as you get further on in this transfer portal process, the guys coming available might not the quality might not be there. So I think that that's the thing that they need to weigh, that the coaches need to weigh, is this guy worth taking and being a part of the 105-man roster? Can he help us? Because if he's just going to come in here and be a backup and not do anything, then I think you maybe roll with what you have and spend that spot elsewhere. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting season, an interesting offseason as well, with the new position coach, Terry Braden, new defensive coordinator with John Butler. So yeah, I mean, this room lost some, but I think the pieces coming back, the returning pieces, while young and some inexperienced, I think there's some high ceilings there.
For sure. I wonder even more so than who steps up on the field to replace Nash and Ty. I wonder who steps up as a leader behind the scenes as well, because they need that right now. Not only did you lose Nash and Ty, but all year they kind of talked about Jamari Butler was kind of the vocal leader of that room, the kind of the heart and the juice of that room. You lose Terrence Knighton, a guy that was like, a father figure for a lot of these guys, and had a lot of personal relationships. You've got Terry Braden coming in after his season with the Chiefs ends. So Braden again credited for similar things as Knighton, good relationship builder. A lot of guys in the Chiefs building really respect him. Doesn't have a whole lot of recruiting experience, but was done good work. Kind of doing both jobs right now, and at least helping out with the transfer portal. And like you mentioned, the guys behind Riley Van Poppel, Keona Davis, Cam Leonard, etc. aren't super experienced, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of intrigue there. You look at the
Yep.
guys they added. We talked about Williams and Renari, but you look at a guy like Jalen George, who is more of a sort of like kind of defensive end. A guy that kind of reminds me of MJ Sherman a little bit. I don't know if he ends up playing Jack. I think he does end up putting his hand in the dirt, but can do some things as a pass rusher. Can defend the run pretty well, and even though he's sawed off, does a really good job of utilizing that leverage to his advantage. Gabe Moore hasn't played over the last 2 years because of
Yeah.
health issues and just redshirting, but he steadily added weight. And you go back and look at that high school film, he's pretty. He can be dominant, and a guy that I think more than anything, it's more so get him in the room, figure it out, and you're kind of playing the long game. They are somewhat. And again, we'll have a transfer portal discussion at some point here soon, but they are kind of prioritizing development on the defensive side of the ball through the portal, and then you're looking at instant impact on the offensive side of the ball. It's an interesting strategy. How on both sides of the ball, it kind of looks a little different. And then you look at the high school editions. I've talked a lot about those three guys: Tyson Terry, Malcolm Simpson, and Kade Peters. Both those guys, I think, can play at a high level. I think all three of those guys have a chance to contribute pretty early. Malcolm Simpson can line up
Mm-hmm.
outside, inside.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Cade. Tyson's more of an interior guy, but if you're looking for your Nash Hotmarker replacement down the line, the profiles are eerily
Yeah.
similar. Both guys
Yeah.
dominant high school wrestlers. Tyson Terry sticking around at Omaha North instead of early enrolling, so he could potentially win a fourth straight state
Yep.
championship, breaking records along the way. And that's a guy that it just feels so similar to what Nash Marker was coming out of high school, that I think Tyson's going to come on campus and impress a lot of people and quickly earn some playing time. And I'm bullish on Malcolm Simpson. I think he's a guy that his best football is still ahead of him. Can be super dominant if he wants to be. Just like kind of a violent defensive lineman. And then Cade, man, like that first step that Cade has off the line
Yeah.
is unteachable. And the level of competition he played in North Dakota won't really translate. He might take a second to adjust to the speed of Power Four football and
Mm-hmm.
the physicality of Power Four football. But he's got an explosive first step. He's got pushback power, drive back power, and he's a violent football player. Like he arrives
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
ball
Yeah.
carrier with intentions to punish, and that's something you can't really teach. And I think he plays the game the way the coaching staff likes. I'm expecting Matt Rule to have a more of a personal oversight over this room moving forward, just as, he kind of takes a step back and becomes more of that CEO type head coach. That
Yep.
kind of was able to pitch in more with individual position groups. We saw that in the bowl game practices, him leading the defensive line. I'm expecting more of that in the future.
Yeah, out of those gonna be true freshmen in 2025, Tyson Terry, Malcolm Simpson, Cade Peterjack. Cade Peterjack is my guy. That guy, I just get the sense of where he comes from, the upper Midwest. Like there's some tough like dudes up there. You have to be tough to live in North Dakota, in my opinion. And like you said, his you flip on his tape and just the violence and the heavy handedness that he plays with is just something that fits Big Ten football. And it's something that Nebraska's defensive line needs to do to be effective. And it's something that Nash Hutmacher played with and Ty Robinson played with. Riley Van Poppel plays with that type of violence and heavy handedness, I feel like. And I think Cade Peterjack is the next one along the line to continue on this stretch of solid defensive linemen that really are going to help out the defense. And I do think that Cade Peterjack is going to find a way to get some rotation snaps as a true freshman in 2025. That's my guy. That's my pick. I'm very, very high on Cade Peterjack. Right now, he's listed at 6'5", 260 pounds. We'll see what he starts the season at. Perhaps we could see him at 270 pounds. I just think it's sort of like the similar trajectory of like Riley Van Poppel. When Riley Van Poppel signed with Nebraska, he just looked like a future captain, like a future single digit guy. I'm getting the same vibes for whatever reason from Cade Peterjack, just because of where he comes from. He knows what hard work is. You got to be tough to live in Fargo. So it's something that I'm really excited that Nebraska won this recruiting battle over Oklahoma. Was it Oklahoma that was like neck and neck with Nebraska with
Yeah, it
this
was
one, Tim?
Oklahoma and Kansas State and Wisconsin. Like it was one of the more
those
impressive
those yeah
victories.
those three programs right there. It's like every time you can take a defensive lineman from those three guys, that's notable. And I think Cade Peterjack is absolutely a notable kid who I'm going to be keeping my close eye on, because I think he can come in and contribute right away. It's not going to be easy, but considering who's in the class right now, they're just going to need some bodies to step up and some young bodies to step up. And I think Cade Peterjack has the tools to hold his own as a rotational player, as a true freshman.
Yeah, this spring's going to be really, really big for this room.
Yep.
I think, and Braden, getting his feet wet in the
Mm-hmm.
college game. I'm intrigued to see kind of who steps up in the spring. I'm expecting Riley Van Poppel to obviously step into a much bigger role. Keona Davis to kind of build where he left off this season.
Mm-hmm.
But behind him, behind those guys, Cam Leonard, I think is going to stick up there. How quick does it come together for Williams and Renari? Because the guy's got all the talent in the world, like one of the better. If you're talking about pure physical talent, one of
Sure.
the best Nebraska's had in a long, long time. On the line. Again, truly like probably the best since what Ty Robinson was when he came in, just in terms of the combination of tools. And obviously, we saw how long it took Ty to get there. I don't expect it's going to take as long for Williams and Renari. Just that, call it a hunch, call it just the fact that Jamar Mosey, the guy that kind of helped develop him in his high school career, is on staff and there to keep him accountable. I think that all matters. But yeah, and then Jalen George and Gabe Bohr. How fast does it come together for those guys? Do any of the
Mm-hmm.
other freshmen step up? Is there a surprise name or two? That potentially emerges. Is it time for Sua Lotu? We've talked a lot about him.
Yeah.
Is this the spring for him?
I I hoped the 2024 season was his year, just to start getting some backup reps with behind Nash, but he had fought. So Sua Lotu had entered Nebraska. He had kind of some injury problems in high school, but then he had some more injury problems this past year, and then he wasn't even suiting up towards the end of the game, towards the end of the season, because of a season-ending injury. So we'll see what shape he is in spring ball. But as of right now, he's still with the program, and he's somebody that I'm really intrigued about, that I think the staff likes, and I think he's just kind of to be an interior defensive lineman in the Big Ten. That's a tough job, man. You need to be strong, physical. You have to have a mean streak. You need to have some FU in you, and I think Sua is learning that right now, from what we've gathered just talking to his teammates about him over the past two seasons. So Sua Lotu is one that I'm really keeping my eye on because I think he's just kind of learning that like what it takes to be a defensive lineman and an effective defensive lineman in this conference. And I think it takes time, and that's okay. It takes a lot of kids, need time to figure it out. But yeah, once he gets healthy, we'll go from there. But Sua Lotu is somebody that I hope continues to stay in the program because I really kind of like his vibe, and I like that poly presence in the defensive line room as well. So yeah, Sua Lotu is one that I'm going to keep an eye on, and hoping he stays healthy and hoping that he gets through what he's getting through because I really like kind of the Nash Hutmacher-ness that he brings to this whole thing too.
For sure. Yeah, I get it. And that's one like yeah, I think I'll keep a close eye on him this spring. I think we'll all be keeping a close eye on this room in the spring. I don't think they're done adding either. I know you touched on that
Yep.
earlier, but I do think
Yep.
they'll add one or two more just for depth purposes. If not, if you can find a high end contributor as well through the portal, you try and add that. But I don't think they're done just because you need some depth. You did lose some guys that you were hoping were going to return through the portal. But yeah,
I have a question, Tim.
go ahead.
So, so as of right now, like I think Dylan Parrott maybe might have like the most beef up front of the guys returning, and so he's like 310 pounds, and of course he's like a former offensive lineman who entered the program as a walk on. But do you think that the staff is going to be searching out and trying to land a transfer portal edition of like 310 plus pounds, just like a 300,
If they
just
can find it,
a
if they can
big
find it,
plugger?
yeah. If
Do
they
they
can
do they
find it,
want
yes,
one?
yeah. Like you look at the names they're bringing in, like now in the D line, it's like all those guys are 290 plus now. Like they are
Yes.
looking for a
Hmm.
big body. I think that's a need. Even if it's not here in this winter kind of portal cycle, I think in the spring, you find yourselves involved with a couple of 310, 320 pounders. Just
Hmm.
because you need a big body in the middle, you need someone that can play up and punch back against some of the bigger centers, interior linemen you face here. And again, this is not a two gapping program,
Yeah,
but it is a program that asks you to kind of win blocks. I mean, win off blocks and win off the line, and you need size to do that. Right now, I think they're a little undersized
they are.
as a unit, and again, we're going to see it no matter what, I think, in my opinion, in 2025, how much Ty Robinson is missed. As good as this group could potentially be,
Hmm.
how the impact of Ty Robinson almost single as an individual is really going to be missed next year because that's a guy that more so than even just the game impact. In the weeks leading up to the game, I was talking to coaches across the country and assistant coaches and stuff. When you game plan for Nebraska, essentially the offensive line was all hands on deck for nine.
Yeah.
And if something else happens, something else happened, but we can't let nine get to the backfield. Like it's kind of like selling out for him. And I don't know the next time you have a guy hypothetically in Williams and Minari who has that potential, but I don't know the next time Nebraska's truly going to get that level of defensive line play from an individual again.
And maybe it comes from Keona Davis or Riley Van Poppel. Maybe those two names are kind of the ones that jump out at me when I like close my eyes and I try to imagine, okay, who can be the next Ty Robinson? Keona Davis, Riley Van Poppel kind of stand out. But again, they're just so young and they need gain reps and they need to continue developing. It's a hard job playing being a defensive lineman in the Big Ten. And Ty Robinson was a 6 year guy and he hit it off in the 6th year, but those guys are still learning and developing. So yeah, absolutely. I agree that the defensive line probably needs some more size, but at the end of the day, I think they're going to stick to what they want to stick to. And as of right now, I believe that's shooting gaps, being aggressive, not two gapping basically, and not having like a 330 pounder out there holding up offensive linemen. So I think that size is needed, and I bet size is coming in some shape or form throughout the transfer portal process.
For sure. And I think to close, I'd say if you want some optimism about this room and even with the unproven nature of the room, um, across his career, defensive line has been a strength for Matt Rule programs.
Yeah,
He knows the position; it's his position, kind of what he's
it's his
coached.
side of the ball at heart.
Yep,
I mean,
he
he's a
knows his
defensive guy at
position.
the
Yep,
heart.
I think he's made a good hire in Terry Braden.
Oh yeah,
And
people are going to want to play for Terry Braden.
Yeah.
Kids are going to want to play for
That's
Terry
going to figure
Gradwin.
itself out real quick. Even though he
It
doesn't have the
will.
recruiting
It
experience, I think
will.
that's going to figure itself out real quick because even talking to the guy and listening to people around Kansas City talk about him, the guy knows how to build relationships. At the end of the day, that matters. And you pair that with Nebraska's resources on the NIL side of things, they're going to find themselves in recruitments. They're going to. I don't think the train's going to come off the tracks in terms of defensive line recruiting. But yeah, very curious to see kind of what this room shapes into in the spring and moving forward. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have plenty of discussion about this room through the offseason. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back with the linebacker episode here pretty soon. So stay tuned for that as well. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you all tuning in, and we'll be back next time.